Okay, so we know we just ended JFK's administration, and we know that he has tried to get civil rights, but what group of people has hindered his ability to get it? The Dixiecrats. And we know the Dixiecrats will exit the Democratic Party and join what party? Republican. And so after Kennedy's death, LBJ, who's the vice president, is going to come in front of the halls of Congress. And he's going to address the legislative branch. Has the that's really hard to say. Has the legislative branch done much to help the civil rights movement? No. What were the two branches that we've seen involved in the civil rights movement? Executive and judicial. The executive doing executive orders, the judicial doing cases, right? And so he goes in front of the halls of Congress, specifically geared towards them, specifically geared towards the Dixiecrats. He says, no memorial, oration, or eulogy could more eloquently honor President Kennedy's memory than the earliest possible passage of the Civil Rights Bill for which he fought so long for. Great. Do you think they're going to do it? No. He's going to have to go twist their arms, right? LBJ will go in and twist a lot of arms. And he had been in the halls of Congress before. So he goes to key people within the party. And if you've seen, there's this picture in the book where LBJ is standing with the majority whip in the Senate, and he's also standing with the Speaker of the House. And he's talking to them. He's saying, you will go in there and do this. And they're like, well, I don't think that's going to go well. And he says, no, you will walk in there, you will get this done, and you will get the support. And this is what's going to lead to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which banned racial discrimination in most private facilities open to the public, including theaters, hospitals, and restaurants. Are these the places where African Americans were having discrimination still? So great, we've done the buses, we've done the schools, and now this is basically covering it all, right? So now, essentially, after this act is done, should there be much discrimination? No, but do you think there's still going to be discrimination? Okay, so it strengthened the federal government's power to end segregation in schools and other public facilities. Okay, so it also, and y'all saw this on your study guide, y'all know the Equal Employment Act was on number 3, right? And we saw on number 1, this one. It's going to create the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission to eliminate discrimination in hiring. And you have to understand, when people got hired for jobs, you submitted an application and you also submitted a picture. There's a reason why you submitted a picture, because can you tell what a John Smith is just by his name? No, he could either be white or he could be what? Black. And so what would happen is they would get the applications, they would look at the pictures, and what would happen to the pictures of the people who were black? They would never get looked at. Okay, because is there certain names that you can identify by a certain race?
Yeah, like
okay.
Tyrone.
If Tyrone Smith was there, they would in need of no picture, right?
Yeah.
Okay, if you were to see my name, you would know I'm Hispanic, right? But there's some just very vanilla names that people didn't know, and so now can they put the picture on it? No, and so this is going to eliminate that practice. Do you think when they do interview, will there be some inherent discrimination? Yes, and that's why the civil rights movement will still continue. I want you to think, is this the 13th Amendment? Is this abolishing slavery? Is this the 14th Amendment about creating equality, or is this about voting here? It's about the 14th. So does the civil rights movement need to continue?
Yes.
Okay, so we know the EEOC is going to be a continuation of what is going to go on. We also see that the effects of this is that African Americans are going to challenge this in all facets of their life. They're going to go into shopping stores and be like, we should get services. They should go into restaurants. We should get services. But do you think it's going to be quick?
No.
And overnight that this is going to ease over? And so this is why we're going to see the civil rights movement under the LBJ and Nixon administration now promote a little bit of violence. Okay, so African Americans now have to continue the civil rights movement because there's still things harboring their right to vote. What were those things that prevented them from voting? Literacy tests, poll tax, grandfather clause, and just barren intimidation. And so there's other things that intimidated them, such as restrictions on when you could go register. Okay, so y'all know when y'all need a transcript, y'all just go down to the registrars and ask for a transcript, right? Well, there used to be voter registrars, and they used to put limitations on African Americans on when they could go register. They used to say they would have to go on the third Wednesday of the month between 12 and 1.
What?
Is that fair?
Nah.
Anybody else can go any other time, but African Americans had to go between 12 and 1. Do you think they had the opportunity between 12 and 1 on the third Wednesday of the month to go?
No.
No, they had to work, and that used to be Waxahachie's date. That they would, the third Wednesday of the month between 12 and 1. And so then what happened to the proportion of African Americans who were registered to vote?
They weren't able to.
They weren't able to. So this is what they're going to be attacking, that African Americans were guaranteed the right to vote by the 15th Amendment, and there is things that are infringing on that. Mississippi had the largest black population, but only 5% were registered to vote, because y'all know the things that are getting in the way, the literacy test, grandfather clause, blatant intimidation. So the local resistance is they denied the vote to the African Americans by enforcing these things, such as the poll tax. The poll tax is equivalent to a day's of work. So it's $8 an hour, right? $64 a day. Could y'all pay that today? It's a day.
$64?
If we were to look at it today's terms of what a day's work is worth, we're talking about $64. Would y'all be willing to pay $64 to vote? No. Back then, my mom has hers. It was about $2.15. That was a day's wage. Right? So we're seeing that this poll tax is really. Is it only limiting African Americans? Who else is it limiting?
Women.
Low income people, women who may be single moms, okay, and literacy tests, do you think they were administered fairly?
Of course
No.
not.
Okay, my mom, when she took hers, she had to recite Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution, and the lady in front of her, how did you Mary had a little lamb? They asked her, what did Mary have? A little lamb. And my mom only remembers that because those are things that stick in your head, and her name was Mary too, and she's like, why are they talking about Mary? And she started to listen. But again, there is...
Was it a white girl?
It was a white girl in front of her. Hey, but there's blatant things that are happening. And this is why they have to have legislation. So what will happen is the legislative branch will come up with the 24th Amendment that bars the poll tax. Because this is going to allow all facets of people, poor and minorities, from being able to vote. So are they completely done? What are the other things that they need to take down? We got the poll tax, we need the what? Literacy test. And so eventually CORE will be organized, and we saw this on the back of our study guide, is that they're going to go into Freedom Summer. And what this is people up north that are part of the Congress of Racial Equality, blacks and whites, are going to go down south to register voters. Are they going to be intimidated, the African Americans? Yes, because they could lose their home. They could lose their jobs. Right? And we're going to see 3 guys. Y'all had it on your study guide, right? They're going out there to register. They're going to the churches. What happens to them? They were killed. Okay? Today I wanted to show the videos, but tomorrow I can't because of the EOC testing. If we have time on Friday, I'll show what happened to them, not the actual. So Freedom Summer, we're going to see black and white civil rights workers organize, and they try to register voters in Mississippi. What this will lead to is the residents are deeply resentful. They will start bombing churches. We're going to see that Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney were killed. Their bodies were put in an earthen dam. And with the torrential rains, that dam was being built, that it came apart and they found their bodies. And it was turned out that the people who are part of the police did it. They're going to go before a jury. Do you think that they're going to stand trial for their stuff? No, they're going to be exonerated. And we're going to see the jury refuse to convict them. So now MLK, along with other people, are going to organize a Selma campaign. And what the Selma campaign is looking at is Selma has bigger issues than what we've seen with Birmingham. Over 50% of its population is black, only 1% is registered to vote. And so they're going to do this giant march. And they're going to march to the Capitol. And it's in amidst this march that they're going over a bridge that the state troopers are waiting on the other side because they said they did not have the right to assemble. The state troopers are waiting there with bully clubs, with tear gas, and they're attacking all the civil rights workers that are going across. MLK is not in the first one. He does not attend. But as these people are being attacked, do you think they could go to a hospital? No, because we already talked. African Americans, they cannot get aid. But with the Civil Rights Act of 64, could they? But do you think they're going to be accepted? And we're going to see a lot of the demonstrators were attacked and brutally beaten. This is going to be captured by whom again? The media. The media captures this, and now it brings national retention to the horrors that were happening. And again, what branch of government needs to step up and get rid of this stuff? We're going to see that it's going to basically go to the legislative branch, and LBJ will get on TV after the events at Selma and their march to the Capitol, and he says, what happened in Selma concerns all of Americans. We must overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice, and we shall overcome. Eventually what we'll realize, every single time that they're marching, there's this song that they sing, we shall overcome. And so he's taking a line that we needed to do something, and this will lead to the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which outlawed the use of the literacy test and sent in federal registrars to register African Americans to vote. Great. The civil rights movement should be done now, right? Have we addressed the equality issue? There's legislation, Civil Rights Act of 64. Have we addressed the voting issue? Poll tax, 24th Amendment, and now this act, 65. Is it going to be over? And this is what's going to lead to the split in our civil rights movement. Prior to this, it's all been nonviolence. But because these acts are not giving them their true equality, African Americans are going to be upset with the nonviolence. It's not working anymore. And so our first place that the civil rights movement actually turns to brutality, that African Americans turn from nonviolence to violence, is Watts. And what they're upset about is that in African American communities, do you think the African American people own the businesses there?
No.
No. They should be allowed into these businesses, but they're not being allowed, or they're being discriminated. And we're seeing that they're going to take justice into their hands. And we're going to see they basically burn and loot their own neighborhood. Not their homes, but the businesses there. The media is going to capture this. How are they going to feel for the African American now? Are they going to feel sympathetic? No, they're going to look at them and they're going to say, whoa, those people now have Civil Rights Act of 64, Voting Rights Act of 65, the 24th Amendment, and look how they're acting. Why are they having to raise up their arms? Because who's resisting? Is the society adjusting to these new acts? And so that's the main reason why they take up arms, is because they're not adjusting. They're not getting that equality. But do you think the media is going to turn against them? We're going to see the media will turn against the movement. And this is going to lead to other racial violence in these cities of Newark, Los Angeles. And we're going to see it's going to mark a transition. So our first part of our civil rights movement, we've seen leaders like MLK and SNCC, right? They all endorse nonviolence, the boycotting. However, our second part of the civil rights movement really takes place after this legislation has been passed, which has given them the equality and has society changed. And so we're going to see that it's going to be marked by leaders, even though Malcolm X is dead by this time has happened. Malcolm X was always saying, if you hit me, I should hit you back. Okay? And he's going to take the black national, have you ever heard of like white nationalist movement? At this time, it's going to be called the black nationalist movement, that they need to take up arms, that they need to secure their liberty. We're going to see the Black Panther Party form at this time. And most people know this is a militant organization that is going to protect their community, but they did other things besides that. They realized that there was no school lunches at this time for the African American children. They did school lunch drives. They did breakfast lunch for them. That's some of y'all have breakfast lunch, right? They did breakfast for the kids at the school. They also did toy drives for them during the holidays. They did medical aid. So beyond being a militant organization, they provided stuff. And then we know Stokely Carmichael, that was part of SNCC, is now going to transgress to the other side, saying no. We should not be nonviolent. If they hit us, we should hit back, and this is going to be the endorsement of Black Power. Y'all have seen like people stand up with the fist, right? And this is the commencement of the African American movement saying no. we cannot be equal in a white society, so white live with them. Let's separate and create our own society. And that's the only way we could be equal is through black separatism. So we're going to see at this point in the movement that, have you ever heard the phrase that black is beautiful? Black is beautiful is going to come out of the second one. And we're going to see all of a sudden that African Americans, instead of embracing the regular society's attire, they're going to start now looking at African attire. They're going to start adoring the fro. I know what I mean when I talk about the fro. Okay, I don't know if y'all do or not. Okay, and so we're going to see that they're going to now adopt a distinct attire, along with embracing the violence of the movement. And so in the late 1960s, Africans will still live in predominantly black neighborhoods, because will they be able to get loans to get into the housing areas in the suburbs? And we know a lot of suburbs, they put up rules that it's white flight, right? That only a certain people could live here. And we're gonna see through suburban communities that put these, is there HOAs in Waxahachie?
Yep.
Okay, they say that your grass could only be so high, right? That you, okay, so y'all know what HOAs are. That's what these HOAs are doing, saying that only certain people could live in the suburban communities. Also banks, they did this thing called redlining. Do y'all know what redlining is? Hey, let me explain San Antonio for y'all. Okay, this is just because I lived in San Antonio. In San Antonio, most of the Hispanics live on the south side. Most of the African Americans live on the east side. And most of the whites lived on the north side. Okay? Each side had a different zip code. So I'm just going to put, this is the zip code I used to live in, 78223, and this is 78222. What they would do is when you're applying for an application, you have to put your zip code. And so what they would automatically do is they would look at these zip codes and they're like, okay, they could get 3% interest. Over here, African Americans, 20% interest. Hispanics, 15% interest on a loan. So who does this eliminate from getting loans? African Americans and who else? So then when they build all these suburbs, we're going to see this is why white flight occurred, because they were able to get these loans to go into this. And this redlining practice will be called illegal. I have to get to an act in 68 that does this. And then there's eventually another act that is going to do this in the 70s. But basically, this is why we are seeing that in the cities, and don't we see this concentration that there's many minorities that are still in the cities? And we still kind of see that white flight. It all stems from the practices that happened from the 60s and before. And we're going to see that now, if we look at our inner city schools, are they all minorities? And then all the suburban schools are still white, right? And so this is what really desegregation did not happen in the 60s and 70s. So what will happen is the Civil Rights Act of 1968. It's going to ban discrimination in the sale of homes. So can the HOA say we're completely a white community? No. Also in rental and in financing. So can they do this thing called redlining? I should have done it in a red marker, right? Right. So African and other minorities still face discrimination in the hiring process. So what is going to happen is this thing called the Philadelphia Plan. I'm getting into stuff that you'll see in Nixon. And I'm going to explain it so when you get to the Nixon study guide next week, it makes sense. So what happened is that anybody who got a federal job had to hire people. And they were hiring people based on quotas. Prior to this, most of the jobs, I'm going to make a fictional business. Okay. Y'all know Guardian over here? Y'all know Guardian? No? Okay. Guardian's here. Okay, do y'all know the steel factory here? Okay, so we're going to do the steel factory. Okay, so prior to this, let's just say they had 100 jobs. And they said all 100 jobs went to white people. Is that fair? Because in Waxahachie, are there Hispanics? Are there blacks? Right, so actually, if we were just to look at our population, about 50% of people in Waxahachie identify as white. About 25% is black and 25% is Hispanic. Okay, so now the government said if the steel place, is to get a government contract, they need to have goals of hiring minorities. Can they say that they're going to hire 100 white people? No, they need to look at the reflection of the population. So, let's just look at our steel plant. How many percent of the population should they hire that is white? 50. How many should they hire that is black? 25. How many should they hire that is Hispanic? This is what's going to set up this idea called quotas. That the government, if you're part of the government and you're getting any federal funding, you need to adhere to this. But who's going to be upset about these quotas? Why would whites be upset about this?
Because they're no longer doing everything.
They're no longer getting all of the jobs, right? They're saying now they're being discriminated because they are what? White. We're going to get into the era of reverse discrimination. Right? And so what this will lead to is a case called Gurgis versus Duke Power. Gurgis Electric Company is going to say, okay, we're going to do intelligence testing. And this is how people will get jobs. Well, who's going to have the better scores? And so this company is going to stay entirely what? White. And they're going to look at this case saying, look, is the educational opportunities between colored people and whites the same? Because have we truly desegregated our society? And so basically they said the use of intelligence tests or other devices, it had the effect of excluding minorities, is now illegal. You cannot do this. Right? Are we okay with this? I know a lot of you have heard of the ASVAB test. Do they use that to discriminate in hiring? No, they just do that for placement. So if they were to use it for placement, that would be fine, but if it's discriminating a group of people. So the effects of the Philadelphia plan is going to lead to affirmative action. Have y'all heard of that word before?
Yes.
And what it's doing is trying to create an even playing field. But there's going to be groups of people who are going to get upset about this, because if we create an even playing field, who is this taking away from? And so the court ruling is suggested that people who were facing discrimination use the EEOC, and it's also going to go to schools that they should start admitting minorities. Is this going to go over well? So in the 70s, we're going to see a lot of people are going to be let in that are minorities, but this is going to lead to a movement about reverse discrimination. That which group of people is being discriminated and not allowed into these positions because of their skin color? Whites. And so this will lead to a case. I'm going to go over this later. That last thing. Just wait. I have enough time, right?
Yeah, you have 5 minutes.
I have 5 minutes to do this last case.
4 minutes.
4 minutes. Oh my gosh, the time. Okay. So because, do you think our society is going to be truly desegregated? No. What will happen is Nixon realizes that communities don't want to do this, and he's going to soft pedal civil rights. And what will happen is the Supreme Court is going to say that they need to bus kids. They need to bus kids. Where do you think most of our minority kids are? The city or the suburbs? City. So they're going to start saying that all of a sudden, that y'all know DISD, right?
Yeah.
That they need to bus kids of DISD to what school districts up here? Allen, Plano. Is this going to cause uproar?
Yes.
Because then this community up here needs to bus some of their kids over here so we can have true desegregation. Are we going to see chaos in the 70s?
Yes.
Oh.
We're going to see in Boston, up in arms, people bombing buses, people throwing stuff at the buses as they desegregate. And so Nixon will eventually attempt to appeal to the Southern voter, the Dixiecrats, saying that we don't have to do that anymore. Eventually there's going to be another Supreme Court case called Bakke versus the University of California Medical School Davis. That UC Davis, that he did not get into medical school because he was white, and African American had gotten in and took his place. And the Supreme Court is going to look at that, and they're going to start looking at quotas, and they're going to realize, do quotas discriminate?
Yes.
I mean, yes.
Yes.
But
It was trying to create an even playing field, but what do you think the Supreme Court is going to have to do with quotas?
They're gonna have.
They have to get rid of them. So are we back to the same playing ground. And I'm going to get to that Bakke case when I get to Ford, okay? But do you now see why it takes, like, y'all live in a colorless generation, I feel. But do y'all understand why it took so long for civil rights to actually get through? Because we still had the resistance, and are we having a reversal here?
Yeah, like, all right, in today's perspective though, when it comes to